Today is Sunday, June 29th, 2025, and this is episode 312 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me today, as always, is Mr. Andrew Catlett.
Good afternoon, sir. I was, when we recorded on a Sunday, I always remember the old monster truck ad. Sunday.
Yeah.
We have no monster trucks or ability to squish them. But nonetheless, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, good. And every day Sunday for you, being an unemployed bum.
Yeah, I've got to start earning $1 pretty soon, though. Yeah.
Well, hey, anybody out there want to hire Jerry for various purposes? He's apparently pimping himself out. So
that's right. Right. If
reach out.
Got any, pressure washing or small engine repair or like CISO type stuff, whatever.
Orchid cultivating, contracting.
Orchids. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, before we go any farther, the thoughts and opinions we express on the show are ours and not those of our employers. I do want to give a call out to our Patreon, and I'm going to make a very concerted effort to pronounce that correctly because someone pointed out that I have not been pronouncing it correctly.
You naughty boy.
I need to do better. So our Patreon sponsors, and for to follow on to that, we're going to try something new starting this episode. We do have a number of Patreon sponsors, and I feel very strongly that we need to reward people who are our sponsors, and B, encourage more of you to be sponsors so that I can retire to that island in Fiji like I've been planning.
Sure.
So anyway, what we are going to do
our hosting, or at least cover our hosting cost,
or at least cover the hosting costs. Well, whichever. We're going to split the show up into two pieces. The first will be published as normal. The second will be, I suppose, a Patreon sponsor exclusive. So it will be available to our Patreon donors, and I'll make sure that is clearly notated in the show notes. And then also, if you are a Patreon sponsor, you should get I think you'll get an alert that there is new content that you're able to access. So you'll be able to get it there. The only thing I haven't worked out yet, in full transparency, is for those of you who are listening like via Apple Podcasts or an RSS reader of some sort. Obviously, Apple Podcasts won't pick up something that is hidden behind a Patreon paywall. So that is. So
let me get this straight. You're going to reward our Patreon sponsors by forcing them to listen to more of us?
Yes. Well, I assume that, like the Bureau of Prisons is a big consumer of our podcasts. They will want more, and so they will be paying. They will have to sign up as a donor.
It's an interesting economic model.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
But anyway, no, I think this sounds great. We've talked offline or off air a few times about, hey, how can we make it more worthwhile for our Patreon sponsors? And I think this is a good experiment. And if you guys have other ideas of exclusives for Patreons or Patreons, those folks. Stories you might want us to cover, topics you might want us to cover. We're open to that. Or, monthly conference calls or something. We're kicking around ideas. You guys tell us what would be useful for your contribution to our humble little show that you would like to hear back from us. So drop us a line, info@defensivesecurity.org, or on YouTube or wherever you find us, on the Twitters or on the Mastodons or wherever it is. Let us know, if you're a patron, how we can better engage with you and provide more relevant content for you.
Thank you. Well said. Well said. So, having said all of that, I will, in keeping with our tradition as of late, I will be now playing the most recent ad from our new sponsor, which has, last week we talked about the CISO, the executive CISO undergarments, and this week the company has expanded their portfolio, because not everybody's a CISO. Look, right? There's other people in the security world, so they're branching out. So I'm going to play this spot.
This episode is brought to you by Funk Defender Blue Team Edition, the only underwear for analysts who've been in the chair since Tuesday, drinking cold brew, fighting alert fatigue, and silently judging those sloppy Nmap scans. Whether you're triaging a phishing campaign at 2 a.m., arguing with the SIM over false positives, or trying not to cry during your 7th incident review of the week, Funk Defender Blue Team is here to keep your base layer secure, even if your perimeter isn't. Are you in the middle of a serious ransomware negotiation with no time for bio break? Funk Defender Blue Team Edition has you covered. Features include Threat Intel Weave that resists odor propagation across air-gapped environments, Zero Chafe architecture, tested in ergonomic chairs and cold, haunted server rooms, elastic waistband strong enough to hold your morale together, even during back-to-back P1s, and a built-in snack holster for mini Slim Jims, or that weird granola bar you found behind the firewall diagram. Got to pull a double shift because DevOps accidentally made TCP port 22 public again? Funk Defender's sleep-deprived soft lining is there to comfort your soul and your butt until someone in charge in change control answers Slack. Use promo code Defend the Drawer to get 50% off your first pack, plus a free pair of burnout-proof socks and a sticker that says, "My detection rules are tighter than my threat model." You might not win praise, you might not get sleep, but you'll still have the one thing the adversary can't touch: cleanish, tactical-grade underwear. Funk Defender Blue Team Edition, because breaches are inevitable, but Swamp Crotch isn't.
And there you go. So hopefully that inspires you to go out and get some new undies.
Your junk needs some defense, and it doesn't need to be funky. That's all I'm saying.
That's right. All right, we're back after having to implement our disaster recovery plan.
It's a good thing we have a well-honed plan for backup, disaster recovery, restoration.
Totally. We failed over to our SunGuard, alternate studio, surprisingly identical to the existing one.
This one's actually under a mountain in the middle of the country. We just have a rapid transit system that takes us directly to our backup studio.
That's how committed we are. All right. So anyway, we were about to get into some stories. So back on track. The first one today comes from Ars Technica, and the title here is "Actively Exploited Vulnerability Gives Extraordinary Control Over Server Fleets." This is not the first time that we've encountered problems like this. I can remember probably a good half a dozen similar issues over the years, but they're going to keep happening. The situation is that Eclipsium, who's a security company focusing on firmware and hardware type vulnerabilities, found an issue in, I think it's called MegaRack. And that particular baseboard controller is used by a host of different server manufacturers. And the issue here is that with a very simple HTTP request to that BMC, an adversary can add an administrative user and then log in as administrator and basically do whatever whatever is possible to do through that interface. And it's some things like powering off the server, which is not the worst thing in the world, but perhaps other things like reconfiguring and just wiping drives, reinstalling operating systems, lots of kind of badness. Sky's the limit a bit. This, again, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where these are things that really should not be exposed to the internet generally, and even so, even internally, they can be problematic because they are often so easy to compromise, as in this instance, that if somebody were inside your network, and there's a good chance that there is, it provides an easy beachhead for adversaries. I mean, I've worked on enough incidents to know that these are one of the things that the bad guys look for once they're in your network, because they're inevitably vulnerable, and they're inevitably trivial to exploit. And a lot of times, by the way, they're not fixable. Now, I think in this instance, most of the vendors I have issued patches, but between the reality that a lot of these vulnerabilities end up not being fixed by the manufacturer, and even when they are, they're not applied by the end customer because they're not maybe necessarily aware of them. This can be something that really shouldn't also not be exposed to your internal network, which is why I had said a couple of weeks ago that what I found was a good design pattern was to have them connected to a network, but disable the switch port until that access is required. Then obviously you have to go through the inconvenience of enabling the switch port. Now, I know that there are, and by the way, like I have personally a little mini fleet of systems at a hosting provider that have their Dell servers that have their BMC exposed to the internet, and there's really nothing I can do about that. Like that's kind of by design, and so there are edge cases where you just can't avoid it, but to the extent you can, they really should be kind of turned off. My view.
Yeah, this is a personal pet peeve of yours. Pet peeve kind of minimizes it a little too much, trivializes it. It's clearly a problem. Here's what we need to do, Jerry. Let's start a service to automatically patch these for people. All they have to do is hook them up to the internet, and then we'll find them and patch them by exploiting them.
It's a great idea. I mean, what could go wrong?
I'm a helper. Look, man, I'm an idea guy. I look for opportunities in chaos to fix things.
What could possibly go wrong?
It's kind of interesting. This article is a little somewhat contradictory at first, where it says, hey, this is being actively exploited. It seemed to be actively exploited. But then they also talk in the article that the disclosure with the proof of concept did not know about any active exploitation happening, but CISA says it is being actively exploited. Either way, it's bad news bears. And I think to your point, people just don't patch these. They don't think to patch these. This isn't usually built into their normal patch management and vulnerability management cadence. And I bet it's highly variable as to what it takes to patch these, whether it, do you have to go physically touch these devices? Is there a way to do it remotely? Can you do it from the UI or the operating system, or do you have to get into the BIOS? Like, it's probably non-trivial to patch, I imagine, which doesn't help the situation.
There's a lot of challenges with this. Number one is you have to have a server that's new enough to receive patches from the manufacturer. So that's one, and quite honestly, that's been a problem. And then number two is the nature of the vulnerability has to be patchable through firmware, and that has not always been the case. I can recall many instances. I can't remember the specific CVE, but it was several years ago. There was one discovered that affected the way that passwords were stored, and it was so deep in the architecture of that BMC that it wasn't patchable. Like, so the only option you had was to turn it off or throw the server away. And then I think the third is that a lot of companies decide after a certain period of time that they're going to take the risk and not have the server under maintenance. And so, which, I've often been critical of companies not having their firewalls under maintenance because, there's obvious issues with that. But, this is perhaps an edge case where, it's not just about the ability to get a replacement server if it dies, which I think is what a lot of people, are judging that decision whether or not to extend maintenance. It can also mean the difference of you getting a fix for a vulnerability like this or not. So
and to be fair to the manufacturer, there's a certain amount of time that they're going to maintain support on these devices, right? If it's a 10-year-old server, I'm not expecting a whole lot from the manufacturer at that point. But yeah, I don't even think that's
not throwing rocks at them for sure. I mean, they have a life cycle, and,
right?
And generally, by the way, the life cycle when you buy the server. I guess the issue for me, and issue might not be conveying my thought in the right way, is that it stands in contrast to other things that we encounter in the IT ecosystem. Whether it's Windows or Linux, if you have an out of date version of Linux and there's no more patches for it, well, you can upgrade to the latest version of Linux, and that is typically always backwards and forwards compatible. And that's true of your database server and your application software. And, it's just broadly the case, but that's not the case in these, some of these firmware products. So it's just a different beast than we're normally used to dealing with.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would also say that availability of the patch is not the problem here.
No, almost certainly not.
Even with patch availability, people are not patching. So,
yeah, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I don't know that a lot of companies think to go look for this. A lot of right, wrong, or indifferent. A lot of organizations run vulnerability or run patch management programs, and that patch management program is based on what their vuln scanner tells them they need to fix. And most often that is done with agent-based scanning. Well, there's no agent that runs on your BMC. And so if there's nobody smacking you on the back of the head saying, hey, go check out Supermicro's website every now and then to see if your model has a BMC firmware update, then it probably doesn't happen.
There are a lot of other scanners that do network-based scans that try to fingerprint as best they can, just based on what's coming back from whatever ports are open on that interface. Again, that's a whole other kind of. I feel this goes back to good asset management anyway, knowing what's out there and knowing the components of what's out there and having some mechanism to follow. I don't know if there's any asset management tools that integrate this sort of thing, but it seems like that would be handy. Yeah. Hey, you've got a server out there that we picked up a feed that says it needs an update, regardless of your active scanner, you've got a passive feed based on asset management. But again, this is asking a whole lot of maturity that we don't often see around this issue. So
for sure. It's, it's not the most pressing thing ever relative to all the other baloney that's going on in the security world, but it can trip you up, especially if you have these things exposed to the internet, which they really shouldn't be. It's a possible avenue for a bad actor to gain a foothold if they end up inside your network, but it's not going to be the point of entry if you're protecting those from the internet.
Indeed.
All right. So our next story comes from Bleeping Computer. I think we talked about this briefly when it first happened. This is a follow-up. The title here is Man Pleads Guilty to Hacking Networks to Pitch Security Services. This is an example of what not to do. There's a guy named Nicholas Michael Kloster. They always have 3 names.
Isn't that the case for presidential assassins? They always have 3 names. Isn't that the
joke? They always have 3 names.
Not saying this guy's assassinating any presidents here. Let's just be clear. It's just I think that's what you're referencing.
I think most people, at least in the U.S., have 3 names, and I think it's when the news refers to them in the context of some criminal proceeding, they always use all 3 names rather than just like the first and last.
It's like when your wife uses your full name, you're in trouble.
You're in trouble.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's very true. So anyway, the deal here is this guy, relatively young but old enough to know better, breached 3 different companies in order to help try to sell his consulting services. Now, when you first start reading,
I'm guessing these companies are like major enterprises with a heavy IT budget and a big security team, right?
No, there was a local gym and a charity, and I forget what the third one was. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So they've got a lot of money.
Shooting for the moon.
Sorry, go on.
When I first started reading what at least as it's reported by this particular article, I had to think, it actually doesn't sound that bad, because he found some serious vulnerabilities on this gym's website, and so then but they didn't end there. So he used the access that he was able to get through some vulnerabilities in their website to reduce his membership fee, to steal a profile picture of, I believe it was one of the employees, and some other shenanigans with which definitely crosses a line from just vulnerability identification to actual malfeasance, and so I think that's where he ran afoul of things in that case. Look, I understand security right now is super competitive. It's there's just a lot of security companies out there, and it's hard to get your name out. And the reality is that there are a lot of, and I see this because I mentor a lot of people in the security world, and a lot of people kind of get into it through bug bounties and pet projects like that. And there are a lot of companies who don't want to pay attention to this stuff, but that doesn't entitle you to go and do stuff like, you as a security professional, we as security professionals need to act ethically. And I know it can be frustrating and whatnot when they don't respond, but like, this is not the way. This is not the way.
The way. Yeah, so apparently he also got access to a camera, a security camera that was wide open. So again, the company clearly was not, these companies were not spending a lot of time and effort on their IT stack. But then he follows up with, hey, you've got these problems with, you can hire me to fix them.
Right. Which it would be different if he, I think it would have been different if he would have said, hey, you know what? I noticed that you have these problems, let me know if you would like to talk about it. Like that is a reasonable position, but saying like, not only did I notice you have these problems, but I also exploited them and changed my own membership
Right.
fee and was stealing information off of your network. That is, that's a bright line that you have crossed in that instance.
Well, he apparently is also not exactly known for doing other good things. Quoting, the defendant is also accused of using stolen credit card information from a third company, a former employer who fired this individual in 2024 after he used the stolen credit cards to purchase hacking thumb drives designed to exploit vulnerable systems. So he also apparently on the nonprofit installed a VPN and changed the passwords of multiple users' accounts. He's facing a potential sentence of up to 5 years in federal prison.
Yeah.
Good times.
Which, again, when I first started reading the article, I felt a little twinge of sympathy, but after getting through the rest of it, I think he's earned it. If, again, assuming the allegations are true, obviously
he pled guilty.
Well, that's true. That's a good point. He did plead guilty, so there's that. Although in federal cases, that's not uncommon. And
you're guilty of being handsome in the federal courts, aren't you?
Absolutely. Well, I think there's a long-standing tradition of the federal courts saying, you can go to trial and face a maximum of 275 years in prison, or you can plead guilty and we'll sentence you for up to 5 years. So
there's one other item, which again, not the best marketing strategy. Apparently, the defendant also posted a screenshot on social media of the gym security camera system that he had, quote unquote, hacked into, indicating he gained control over it. Again, not good marketing strategies. If you're trying to do some security consulting, take a note. Don't do these things.
This is not it. Yeah, this is not it.
No. Maybe take like a Valpak coupon out or an ad in the Yellow Pages. Not this. You could print up some really, really cheesy looking like roadside signs. You could just stick in the sign like, ransomware, call me. Those, because a lot of people apparently hire people off those signs is what I'm seeing in my neighborhood because they're everywhere.
Yes, clearly so. By the way, even if he would have gone to the gym, taken his laptop to the gym and asked to meet with the manager and did it, all of this in front of the manager, that would have been a very different.
On a treadmill.
Well, yeah, of course, on a treadmill. Why not?
Look, you got to meet your customers. Stairmaster, sure. You got to meet your customers where they are. You've got show that you care. You understand their business. You're enabling their business.
Okay,
I feel like we've beat that one to death. Yes.
Yeah, just don't do that. Don't be that guy. Doesn't end well. And I just one last thing on that. I know that right now there's a glut of people entering the industry, and I don't think there's enough jobs to go around personally. And so it can be hard to kind of differentiate yourself. And when you tie that with the fact that a lot of companies, especially small companies, seem like they don't care, they're not taking this stuff seriously. And I think a lot of, especially younger security people, can kind of have that edge to them. They feel invincible or kind of above the fray. You can really screw yourself. So anyway, the next story. This is, by the way, the last story for the non-Patreon sponsors. So our last story for that crew comes from HelpNet Security, and the title here is 71% of new hires click on phishing emails within 3 months.
That's a much higher stat than I would have guessed.
I was surprised, but then I started to reflect on what it's like, what it must be like, because I haven't entered a new company since like 1999.
Back when the dinosaurs roamed.
I can imagine that as a new hire, you are being bombarded with automated email baloney coming from all over the place. And
Sure.
it is probably difficult to separate out what's legitimate from what might not be legitimate.
Yeah, you don't know what normal is yet.
Right, exactly. Exactly. You don't
Though-
know, is it common for your CEO to reach out to you? I don't know.
He may need Apple gift cards on the regular.
It's so true.
Though back in '99, the last time you joined a new company, I mean, you were getting phishing attack tests in punch cards, if I recall correctly.
Yes. Yes, that's right. Right.
If you youngins don't get that joke, look it up.
So funny story. You know, shortly, because you were the one that hired me.
And I'm sorry. It's my fault.
It's been a rough ride since then.
All downhill.
All downhill. So shortly after I joined that company, just recall who was sitting at the reception desk.
Yes, I recall.
Very, very easy to look at young lady, right? Clicked on and launched the I Love You virus. Okay.
So
and
you
for
may
those
have to
of you,
describe what that is. Yeah.
So the I Love You virus was one of the first kind of mass mailing viruses that really went viral, I guess is the kids would call it these days. But it was a self-replicating, not in like the malware sense of the word, but it would would send a copy of itself to everybody in your contact list. And so if you clicked on, I don't remember what the payload was, but it would send out an email from you to all the people in your contacts saying something like, I've been ashamed to admit this, but I need to tell you that I love you. And then it had a link or an attachment that I think was supposed to be like a love note. And you open that it in turn sent one from you out to your list. And so that kind of ran like wildfire. And that was shortly after I joined. So I don't know how long she had been there when that happened, but I can certainly see how that could happen. I know that, in my last company, and I suspect many companies are the same, like there's an absolute pantload of automated emails from your HR systems,
Sure.
from your sales systems, from your intranet, from your ID management system, from this system, from that system. And just don't know, you're not acclimated to know what to look for, what not to look for. So it makes me wonder, by the way, if adversaries, how attuned to this reality adversaries have been. Like, are they focused on finding people, for example, on LinkedIn who have only recently started a job and then focusing their spear phishing attacks on them? And if they're not, I'm guessing after they read this report, they probably will be.
I will say, for my anti-phishing reports that I get from my email security tool, new users get malicious emails pretty quick. So somehow, some way, bad actors find out about new employees pretty quick. Usually within a week or two, we see folks who are just joined that our email security tools are catching some sort of malicious email being sent to them. And for a history lesson, I just happened to look it up while we were talking, the I Love You virus, love bug or love letter, the attachment was loveletterforyou.txt.vbs. So
there we go. Visual Basic script. Yep.
Yep. And typically, most of the settings for Windows would hide the extension of a known file type. So it just looked like loveletterforyou.txt, which is text file. So Visual Basic script, it launched against your Windows address book used by Microsoft Outlook and it spread to over 1 million computers on May 4th and May 5th of the year 2000. And it was coded by a student at the AMA Computer College of Philippines. And at the time, he was poor and struggling and thought that internet access was a human right. And he did this to basically, it looks like, protest.
Really served its purpose.
Well, I'm sure it created a lot of awkward conversations, much like you and the young lady who was a receptionist at your new job. And
I mean, I brought flowers. I saw, yeah.
And how was his sexual harassment training after? Was it pretty good?
Well, as I recall, by the way, there was a widespread sexual harassment problem at that company.
Yes.
So I don't know that training was.
There's a lot of stories from that company. It was the .com era, folks. Let's just say that Jerry and I were too low level. We did not participate in the cocaine in the office and the VPs and the CEOs sleeping with other executives. We were just lowly engineers, not in the know at the time.
Totally.
We were told we were on the rocket ship. We were under.
We're underneath.
But that's okay. It's quite all right.
Goodness. So yeah, the other findings in this article from a report states that in addition to the 71% of new hires falling for phishing, new hires are 44% more likely to click on phishing than experienced staff, and that is people that have been there for more than 90 days. And there is a 30% drop with targeted training.
That surprised me.
Yes, that is.
That is pretty impactful. We often, at least I do, sort of am skeptical of anti-phishing training, but that's a pretty interesting stat. I wonder if there's also some correlation of time and seat, that it takes time to get through the training. Maybe that's also giving you more knowledge about what's normal and what's expected. I don't know. That's a really interesting stat, unless it's from a company that sells anti-phishing training. But either way, it's a very interesting stat that tells me maybe there is some value. In general, kind of riffing off this for a moment, I think I go back to the stance that I've taken many times in this show, which is we need to set our users up for success, and that even if they do click on a phishing attack, it isn't a fatal outcome for the company or a really negative outcome for the company. So I'm not a big believer in putting all my eggs in the training basket, but if it helps, great. But I also want to limit the damage that can be done when somebody is a victim and ultimately is tricked into clicking on something they shouldn't.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this before. I think that a lot of, especially senior executives, view people as it pertains to phishing as like, deterministic state machines, like a firewall where it will always pass or always block, an email that looks a certain, has a certain set of attributes. And that's just not the case. It will depend on what time of day you get the email. Is it before lunch or after lunch? Is it, when you first wake up? Is it right before you're leaving on vacation? There are a lot of factors that go into the susceptibility of people. Even the same person and their likelihood of falling for a fish is just going to change over time, even within the same day. So
yeah,
I have had instances where an employee fell for a legitimate phishing attack, and it resulted in a security incident. And that, the senior executive over that area, after finding out that this person had taken the required annual phishing security awareness training that included phishing training, wanted to fire the person.
Wow.
And I laid on the tracks. Like, that is not okay.
That's wow. That's yeah. I have trouble with that.
Not okay.
This is someone who's the victim of a social engineering. It's a psychological based attack. This is, although I do think Deterministic State Machine is a great name for like an industrial electronica band.
Great, another venture for me now.
I think I saw them open up for Nine Inch Nails in the 90s in Detroit.
All right. So for those of you who are listening for free, we're going to say goodbye for now, and then we're going to transition to the Patreon sponsored part of our show. We have a couple stories that I think are actually will spawn some quite interesting discussion. If you do want to be a sponsor, by the way, you can go to our Patreon site. Sorry. It's patreon.com/defensivesec. And you can donate through that. In the meantime, you can find links to the stories we talked about on our website at defensivesecurity.org. Just look for episode 312. You can find me on Mastodon or the Fediverse. It's at Jerry at infosec.exchange. And where can people find you?
I am both on X and Mastodon, your fine server. At Lerg, Lerg, on infosec.exchange and X.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. And we'll talk again next week.